Hey everyone, today we're diving into a really cool engineering story from Zendesk. It's all about how they got a handle on a critical tech cost that was spiraling out of control. And they did it without losing the vital insights their teams need to do their jobs. So how'd they pull it off? Let's get into it.
So this is the exact question Zendesk was staring down. They were in a really tough spot. Their observability platform, Datadog, was absolutely essential for keeping the lights on, but the cost was just growing and growing, turning into this massive, unpredictable bill.
And you've got to understand, Zendesk was a true power user. We're talking metrics, APM, logs, the whole shebang. This data was their lifeline when things went wrong, and it was key to making smart decisions about their infrastructure. So just switching it off, that wasn't an option. For a company at their scale, that would be like trying to fly a 747 with your eyes closed.
Okay, so what did they do? Well, they didn't just go in with a hatchet and start cutting things randomly. No, they started with a really smart, methodical investigation, and they used a classic, time-tested principle to guide the whole thing.
They leaned hard on the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. The idea is actually super simple but so powerful. In pretty much any system, a tiny fraction of the inputs are responsible for the vast majority of the results. For Zendesk, this meant that a small chunk of their data was probably giving them most of the value, while another small chunk was causing most of the pain, the cost. The real trick was figuring out which was which.
And this slide right here lays out their game plan perfectly. They broke this huge problem down into 3 very clear targets. First, find the golden nuggets, the traces that are actually valuable. Second, hunt down the biggest offenders, the logs that are costing a fortune. And third, figure out which metrics people are actually looking at. It's just a super focused, data-driven way to cut the fat without touching the muscle.
But here's the thing, and it's a big one. You can't optimize what you can't see. So the absolute first thing they did, the crucial first step, was to build these cost attribution dashboards. For the first time, they could connect the dots between what a specific team or a specific service was doing and exactly how much it was costing them. This visibility was the foundation for everything that came next.
So with that new visibility in hand, they scored their first major win. It was in the world of application performance monitoring, or APM. This is where they figured out a way to be way smarter about the data they were collecting. Now check this out, because the solution here is just simple genius. Normally, a full trace captures every single little step of a request. It's super detailed, which is great, but it's also incredibly expensive to store. Their idea? Switch to single span ingestion. Instead of keeping the whole movie, they decided to just keep the movie poster, the very first step called the root span. But, and this is the clever part, they would pack that poster with all the most critical information from the rest of the movie.
And here's exactly how they pulled that off. They added over 100 custom data points, Datadog calls them facets, to that one single span. Stuff like how long a database took to respond, which specific cluster was being hit, even the database version. See, this wasn't about throwing data away. It was about being surgical, picking out only the most valuable info that gave them just enough context to troubleshoot most problems, all for a tiny fraction of the cost.
And the results? Well, they were pretty incredible. This chart tells the whole story. Look at that first bar. Trace volume from their main service actually doubled because the business was growing. But by cleverly sampling less from other services, look at the total volume on the far right. It stayed completely flat. They literally absorbed all that growth without their bill going up and in.
All right, next up, they went after an even wilder beast, logs. Now, if you've ever dealt with logs at scale, you know they are notoriously hard to control. They can create these huge, totally unpredictable cost spikes out of nowhere.
The real headache with logs is that a tiny, seemingly insignificant error can trigger a massive flood of data, and Zendesk saw this happen. A simple little permission error caused one service to just start hammering a system, retrying hundreds of times a second. The result was a mountain of noisy, completely useless, and very expensive log data.
And this chart? Wow. This chart tells a heck of a story. On March 6th, their log volume was through the roof. After some digging, they found a simple misconfiguration that was causing every single log to be sent twice. They fixed it, and look at March 7th. The volume just falls off a cliff. That's a huge win from finding one simple, silly duplication error.
So, what were their main moves? Well, first, they kept their filtering rules simple to avoid mistakes like that duplication bug. Then they used tools like Livetail to actually see what they were throwing away, and log patterns to spot noisy logs they could just get rid of in the code itself. It was a full-on attack on waste from every angle. And the payoff for all that work?
For one of their busiest services, they cut log volume by a factor of 4. A 4x reduction. That is a massive amount of savings, and it came just from getting rid of noise and duplication.
So, after a whole year of this focused effort, what was the grand total? What did the final report card look like? Let's take a look at the evidence. First up, for APM tracing, you can see it right here. The cost trend line completely flattens out, just stops going up. And remember, this is happening while the business is growing and traffic is increasing. Their APM bill just stopped rising. That's what success looks like.
And for logs, the picture is even more dramatic. It's not just a flat line. It's a clear, sustained drop in their costs over time. They were actively reducing their spending, all while making sure their engineers still had the signals they needed to do their jobs.
And maybe most importantly, those cost attribution dashboards they built became a shared language. For the first time, engineering and finance could sit down, look at a chart like this one, see exactly which services were driving the costs, and have a real productive conversation about what to focus on next. It completely changed the game.
This quote from the Zendesk engineering team really sums it all up perfectly. They proved that you can have both. You can have tight cost control and you can have effective observability. You don't have to sacrifice one for the other.
So what are the big takeaways here? The playbook is actually pretty clear. First, you have to start with visibility. If you can't see the problem, you can't fix it. Second, use that 80-20 rule to focus your fire on the biggest targets. For traces, the lesson is to think smarter, not more. And for logs, you have to be absolutely ruthless in hunting down and stamping out noise and duplication. And that really leaves us with one final question to think about for our own systems. When you look at your own observability bill, are you paying for just raw data, or are you paying for actual actionable insight? Because as Zendesk showed us, there's a huge and potentially very expensive difference between the two.